Thank you, Chairman. In the aftermath of the financial crisis, part of the government's attempt to balance the books through wide-ranging austerity measures, a staggering 139 Garda stations were closed between 2012 and 2013. Fine Gael and Labour were the government who closed these stations. Recently, 5 of those properties were sold between 2021 and 2022, which raised over £1 million for the Exchequer. This averages out to over £200,000 per property, most likely sold off at below value, given what prices for properties are going for today. Not only were there closures of Garda stations, but some stations were downgraded or subsumed into larger stations, leaving the ordinary citizens of the state without a Garda station in their local sub-districts. Stations which had been open for 24-hour periods were downgraded and only open for a few hours in the daytime. All in all, the government's downgrading of Garda resources amounted to a colossal attack on all rural communities in particular. What rural communities lost when their local Garda station closed or downgraded is the physical presence of their local Garda members. Now they get an odd passing patrol car with no community Garda involvement. This decision by the government of the day was a mistake. The lack of proper consultation with the public was glaring, similar to that when decisions were made to close our local post offices and banks. While some would say that some of these stations were non-productive, others would say that they gave a sense of security to the local population and impacted on how safe a community felt. Locals, especially those in rural areas of Ireland, must now travel further to gain access to their local Garda stations to make complaints or get some forms stamped or signed. While some stations were not fit for purpose due to the lack of proper investment, many were upgraded only to be closed by Fine Gael and Labour. While those in government maintained that this type of restructuring was needed, many rural communities were exposed to the dangers of increased criminality and antisocial behaviour. Rural communities throughout the country were left exposed and vulnerable. The decision to close these stations was short-sighted, with no consideration for the drastic impact on local communities. Take, for instance, even a county close to Dublin like Wicklow today. More than half of Wicklow's 17 Garda stations have fewer Gardaí to tackle crime in 2023 than they did in 2013, and more than a quarter have less staff than they did 12 months ago. 10 years ago, in 2013, there were 328 Gardaí working in Wicklow stations. In December 2022, there were 308, representing a drop of 6% in the Wicklow Garda workforce. In an analysis of more than 560 Garda stations nationwide, it is found that nearly a quarter has suffered a drop in Garda numbers in the last 12 months, up to the end of December 2022, Minister. The lack of Garda presence in rural areas is leaving people living in fear. Even farmers living in low-crime areas are still fearful of being targeted, with their worries over falling victim of theft, coercion, illegal dumping and trespassing. The closure of rural Garda stations during the recession was also identified as a significant contributor to the exacerbation of social isolation in rural areas, according to a 2019 report released by the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Justice, which suggests that community policing in Ireland has been undervalued and marginalised by successive governments. The report recommends the deployment of more community Gardaí to the affected areas and the establishment of a rural Garda task force to tackle specific issues. Community policing must be the core of Irish policing and should not be viewed as a marginal specialist activity. The report made several other recommendations, including more funding for text alert schemes, a review of policing and other agencies along the border, and the creation of a new rural crime classification to track trends and rural crime overall. The report calls for proactivity, addressing problems within communities to become the organising principle of police activity, rather than reacting to crimes already committed. We have other issues in relation to activities of crime and the need for a dedicated state solicitor for West Cork. West Cork Minister, to replace the Solicitor Malachy Bood, who retired, and I wish him the very best, who retired recently. Jeremiah Healy of Healy Crowley Solicitors, in addition to his role as State Solicitor for Cork North, has been acting State Solicitor for Cork West. As you know, Minister, we have 500 kilometres of coastline off the South West Cork coast. Former State Solicitor in West Cork, Malachy Bood, in his 36 years still as State Solicitor, he was involved in prosecuting some of the country's biggest smuggling cases, with a combined street value of over £1 billion being seized. It is hugely important that West Cork would have a State Solicitor in place. It is astonishing that that system isn't in place, that when they know somebody is coming to retire, surely they would have been given prior indication that they would at least have that person's replacement in place. And it's casting a great disappointment in the legal circles and in West Cork. And also, well, I have the floor, I have to talk about, you know, I'm Secretary of a local community alert group, and I have noticed, Minister, I know you can't inject life into everything, but maybe along the lines they'll have to get some serious consideration. I know there's neighbourhood watches and there's business associations. These are very important elements of working with the Gardaí in the local community. But I have noticed a lot of the community alert groups have almost died since the COVID came in, and I pay tribute to the people that maybe spend years and years of their life going out to meetings with long cold nights and going along fitting aid calls, keeping people happy in their homes, and probably felt that, you know, they had a 2-year break and maybe they had spent the last 30, 40 years doing this and it's just time to pass it on to someone else. But unfortunately, it's not easy to find people to replace these good people. So I think there needs to be an injection of life put into the community alert, and that might have to come through via Muinton and Tira. Because I was at, I wasn't at a meeting, but because I was in the Dáil recently, and there was a meeting in West Cork, and one of the people in the community alert, I think it was a chair or secretary, I'm not sure, she got up and she said that we need to get a replacement guard in our community. And she was told that there's a guard there for 2 years, something's wrong somewhere. And there's a disconnect starting to appear in local communities. And there was a real drive before to get community alerts at the forefront, and they delivered, in fairness, in a voluntary capacity. With the Gardaí, of course, there's always with the Gardaí. They attended the meetings, worked with the local communities, any concerns, they nipped things in the bud, whether they're young or old. And you know, I often see about young people, you know, if they go wrong, they can easily be brought around if the right effort and the right care and kindness is shown to them, because there's no one perfect in this world. So, if you know, I mentioned there earlier about the text alert scheme. It was actually a kind of a brainchild of my own, maybe 15, 20 years ago, and people thought, you know, I had two heads on when I said it at the time. But it's become a very important scheme now. And you know, communities are concerned because, in fairness, I have to admit that the crime is fairly low in my own area, and there's no point in I saying any different to that. But at the same time, in saying that, cattle are being stolen in parts of West Cork, and you know, it's concerning. And if that's the kind of activity that's creeping out. There was a vehicle down in the Mizen Head there recently, and in fairness to the local community, they moved pretty quick. And when the guards went to them, they just said they wanted to walk around and have a look around at people's land and ground. West Cork is about 70 miles west of Cork City. It was very nice of them to come down for the night. Oh, it was night time to take a walk around. So we have a fair idea what is going on there. But again, that was thanks to the alertness of the local community that people were on top of the game. And Carrigaline Garda Station, it's outside of my constituency. It's independent councillor Ben Dalton O'Sullivan has been fighting bravely. Imagine a Garda Station as big as Carrigaline, not manned. Most of the time by day and by night. That's an astonishing situation that the population of Carrigaline is left without a Garda, and at very important times. And as I said, Councillor Ben Dalton and some independent councillors brought that to the forefront and continues to bring it to the forefront. Others are following suit now, but there needs to be an understanding that Garda stations are the lifeline in local communities. And whether that's in Scull or if that's in Castletownbere, Clonakilty or Cork, Carrigaline, it's important that they're manned. It's important that they link up back to the community. I always believed that the Garda, and that's gone well and truly now, but there was a big fight at me years ago, that the Garda that was appointed to the community lived in the community. And in those communities, they were very safe when that was the case long ago. But unfortunately, now they could be 60, 70 miles away. But look, that's not for me to argue, that's another day's argument. But it is hugely important that Garda stations, are continuously manned, and that the community Gardaí are not taken away from the community. They're there continuously working with the community, working in the community alert groups, the neighbourhood watch groups, all those groups which kept people safe in their homes. And I plead with you, Minister, to give a very serious look at the community alert groups, because I'm very concerned that they're starting to slip away, and they were the lifeline of rural communities. Thank you.